In the realm of clandestine operations, where darkness and intrigue intertwine, lies the enigmatic Deep State, a covert shadow government that orchestrates its hidden agendas without fear of discovery or accountability. It is within this realm where advanced technologies that some claim are reverse engineered from otherworldly origins are harnessed and used for nefarious purposes. Recently, new and intriguing evidence has been presented to shed light on these startling claims. I ask that you keep an open mind as we seek to unravel these mysteries and evaluate the veracity of the claims throughout this piece. The truth is out there, but only if we choose to really see it.
Thomas Jefferson said the government must never lie to the people. Has our government been lying to us about UFOs?
We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
A shadowy government free from the law itself.
The purpose of the CIA and the intelligence apparatus was to create a constant pipeline of new wars.
The military-industrial complex is happy to invest all of your money in alleviating their fears.
We must also be alert that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
My gosh! We're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
It's these technologies which an unsupervised and frankly illegal operation have, which is a threat to the national security.
On Monday, June 12, 2023, Dr. Steven Greer held an event entitled Disclosure 2.0 at the National Press Club. Throughout the presentation, the audience was introduced to whistleblower testimonies that were, to say the least, extraordinary. If just one of those claims presented at this event are true, well, then things are a lot spookier than we thought. Dr. Steven Greer is a prominent figure in the field of ufology and extraterrestrial research. He's widely recognized for his contributions and tireless pursuit of understanding the mysteries surrounding unidentified aerial phenomena and the existence of intelligent life beyond our planet. Through his work, he has brought together experts, witnesses, and researchers to engage in serious discussions and scientific investigations. During his recent Disclosure 2.0 presentation, Dr. Greer revealed that based on the testimony of over 700 Disclosure Project military and corporate whistleblowers, there is a shadow government operating illegal UFO, UAP operation bases throughout the world.
And we're not talking the legal black budget of the United States. We're talking about projects that presidents and CIA directors and secretaries of defense and members of the Congress who have a need to know and are cleared TSSCI in SCIFs, secure compartmented information facilities, have been blatantly either gaslit, denied access. That is the foundation of everything we've done.
Dr. Greer claims that there are 146 known bases that are conducting illegal black budget operations around the world. Was this the kind of government overreach that President Eisenhower tried to warn the nation about in his farewell address? Greer thinks so.
Good judgment seeks balance and progress. Lack of it eventually finds imbalance and frustration. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
And Eisenhower wasn't alone.
A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
He realized early on that the purpose of the CIA and the intelligence apparatus was to create a constant pipeline of new wars for the military-industrial complex. And he realized they had been lying to him and trying to trick him. And he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And then, you know, for the next 1,000 days of his presidency, he was at war with his military and intelligence apparatus.
I know people who have since passed away, like our witness, Stephen Lovkin, who was at the White House with Eisenhower, who said point blank, the president lost control of these projects and that he was very upset and angry about it, but these projects became so compartmentalized that he no longer could control them.
So now that we have a better understanding about what the Black Ops intelligence apparatus is capable of, let's get to the testimonies. During the Disclosures 2.0 event, there were 11 testimonies presented, 6 via Greer himself, because there are some whistleblowers who don't feel that it is safe to reveal their identities, and 5 whistleblowers who bravely appeared in front of the crowd and the cameras to tell their story. The first testimony is by Steven Greer himself.
And this is the big story. No one's telling you. A large number of the UAPs are in fact deep black budget electromagnetic field propulsion devices based on the study of extraterrestrial vehicles that began in the 1940s. That is a fact. We can prove it.
According to Dr. Greer, most of the videos that have been recently released from the military showing pilots targeting UFOs are actually Black Ops aircraft that have been reverse engineered from recovered crashed alien ships. He claims that they have been doing this for decades.
You can look up the Cash Landrum case. Back in 1980, outside Houston in Texas, they were unable to figure out how to get its energy system to work. They, I think rather foolishly, put a nuclear energy system on it. It malfunctioned. And as it did so, it radiated innocent people in their vehicle underneath it. It later was escorted by helos to a base west of there. The man who debriefed the 4 human pilots of this and debriefed them, we know, and we have his testimony. He's Air Force Office of Special Investigations out of Kirkland Air Force Base. So the Cash Landrum case involves civilian injuries. They tried to sue the government. The government denied they had any knowledge of it, but the constitutional government of the United States doesn't know this. This is the big problem. And it's so shocking. You want to sort of go into denial, this just can't be.
In testimony from the anonymous whistleblower MS, we learn about the Dugway Proving Ground location in Utah. MS claims to have seen an extraterrestrial ship while working as a contractor at the enormous 1,300 square mile underground facility.
He worked for C. Martin Corporation, contractor, and he was in a facility that had an extraterrestrial vehicle that was being studied by scientists. So this object was there in 2009. He didn't know the date of acquisition, but he thought it was fairly recent.
The next anonymous whistleblower is known as TE, and in 2009 he was a member of an ET and ARV, alien reproduction vehicle, crash retrieval team based out of Nellis Air Force Base in northern Nevada.
He was on a retrieval team in the Nellis Range in the Nevada test site north of Nellis Air Force Base. This object was retrieved because it became disabled, Some of these retrieval operations are not extraterrestrial, but they would like sometimes the public to think maybe it was, because the bigger secret, I will tell you right now, is not the extraterrestrial issue. It's these technologies, which an unsupervised and frankly illegal operation have, which is a threat to the national security.
TE's testimony continues with him having a meeting with two ETs, whom he describes as being bald with large eyes, around 5 feet tall, with no pinna, the fleshy outer part of your ear. These ETs made it very clear to him that they were not hostile. According to Steven Greer,
all extraterrestrial civilizations are non-hostile. If they were hostile, the technologies they have would have been made quite clear to us in August of 1945. If they were hostile, and given the galactically foolish things we have done, targeting them, striking them, now these systems that are faster than the speed of light, moving out into space, the technologies they have in a fraction of a second could shut down all those systems and everything else. They have not. Why have they not done that? Because they are essentially very peaceful, highly organized, socially evolved, psychologically and emotionally evolved civilizations.
And the last part of TE's testimony is perhaps the most shocking. When he tried to leave his position at the Air Force Base, he was intercepted by a creature that we have come to think of when we hear about the Greys. According to both TE and Greer, these aliens are man-made and are called programmed life forms. One of these PLFs tried to physically stop TE from leaving the grounds, but he fought back.
And so what happened is that his pickup truck went into sort of complete lock, motor died. He opened the door because he saw this creature, and he hit it, it fell, he kicked it, and it split open, and he saw the integrated circuits and fiber optics and what have you.
In 2009, whistleblower SL, a member of the Coast Guard, reached out to the Disclosure Project regarding a craft recovery near Guam. According to SL, in 2002, his ship, the USCGC Sassafras, a buoy service vehicle, had been sent to assist the retrieval of an extraterrestrial vehicle that had been shot down over the water. According to SL, the vehicle had become caught up in a Japanese trawler's netting. Dr. Greer claims that we have been shooting down UFOs since the 40s, including the crash that started it all, Roswell, New Mexico.
So even at that point, these had been early systems. We have a FBI memo from a field agent that we released. It's now one of the most watched, viewed documents on the FBI website of the fact that a field agent at the Roswell, after Roswell, said to J. Edgar Hoover that a disk was downed because we had switched on a new radar system. So that's what began to be experimented with, and this is why from the mid-40s forward, there were a number of these downed objects that we've been able to document. If we've documented 122 of them, I suspect there have been multiple numbers of that.
The next series of whistleblower testimony was from people who were brave enough to appear live at the podium during the event.
This is really the tip of the iceberg. These represent 0.5% of the Disclosure Project witness list.
Lieutenant Colonel Donald Heckert is a retired Air Force pilot who flew over 100 combat and reconnaissance missions. According to Heckert, he has had 2 documented encounters with UFOs in his career. The first encounter was during the Vietnam War.
I was flying an operation called Linebacker 3 going into Laos. I was in an orbit at 14,500 feet just south of the Laotian border. And my 2 armed escorts, because the RF is unarmed and they're there to protect me, were delayed on takeoff. So I'm doing just a racetrack type of orbit. There are things that monitor in warfare called GCI sites. These are radar sites that vector in the fighters to the people that are intercepting you. What happens next is that I get an alert from 3 GCI sites and the early foreman AWACS that I've got traffic that is a fast mover near Mach 1 coming out of North Vietnam, Laos, heading for me in orbit. That concerns me, and they tell me, oh, don't worry, that target is above 70,000 feet, and you know it can't get at you at this point. So I'm a little relieved, but then I finally get to see it, and it's on a wavelength of light that I've only seen one other place, and that is in a nuclear pile on an active nuclear power generation, and it's called Teller light. It is very unique, very white, very, very bright. We watch this thing, and it's way above there, and I'm a little relieved until all of a sudden it comes from 70,000 feet down to 12,500 feet in 2 seconds. It sets off everything in my aircraft. The 3 GCIs and the AWACS are really concerned about me at this point. And as we go on parallel with this thing flying at 5 miles an hour, and then they ask me, will you intercept this if you can? My backseater and I agree, hey, this is important. We can see this. We need to document it. I go to Afterburner, and we accelerate very quickly through Mach 1, go up to about Mach 1.2, and I close to within 3 nautical miles of this UFO. That white light at 3 miles goes out of sight within less than 2 seconds. I go back to the home base because I'm out of fuel, land. All that material, all the mission material is confiscated, and I'm told, don't talk about it.
And the second incident happened while he was on a mission over North Korea.
The next one is on a U-2R, and that's a Blackbird. I'm at 70,000 feet above that on the DMZ of Korea. This has been a combo mission, which means I'm taking photo intelligence during the daylight, 3 miles off the DMZ. We have a sunshade that protects you during the daytime in the U2 because the sunlight's so intense. You're about above 98% of the atmosphere at that point. Anyway, I have that slidden back, everything's looking good, and all of a sudden I am blinded by that same frequency light from above. It turns my black airplane white. This light tracks me from above. I can show you later missiles that come between me and my other RF-4. My airplane's got holes in it. They never made me abort a reconnaissance operational mission. This scared me so bad that I had to abort. But when I land, normal debrief does not take place. They just say, go shower and go to your room.
On to the next whistleblower. The next whistleblower was a member of the United States Marine Corps who, in 2009, had a shocking encounter with a man-made UAP and the Black Ops squad that was sent to retrieve it in an Indonesian jungle. His unit had been deployed to the Philippines as part of Operation Katsana, a humanitarian mission, when they became aware of a destructive earthquake and tsunami that had hit the coast of Sumatra.
We were then briefed that we were going to be armed during this operation, just to also provide security for the transportation coming to basically drop off medical supplies, sheltering items, food, purified water, things like that. So they ended up selecting certain Marines to go ahead and do this. We were only in sticks of six Marines, and we flew to the southwestern part of the city, which is Padang. Looked a lot different through satellite imagery that I've recently seen. Back then is a lot different, especially because most of it was decimated, on fire, rubble, flooded, you name it, basically the worst kind of scenario you could ever see. From then, once we touched down on this landing strip, we got off the bird, and what we were instructed to do at that point through the briefing was to push to a high ground at least to get better observation. So at that point, we decided to push forward. We trekked up about 300 meters. At this time, I have a Panasonic camera that has the ability to take photographs. It has a ability to take videos, obviously. When we got to this high point, I was taking video camera, and I had actually turned to the north, which just kind of slopes down. And right there was something that was rotating, and it was transitioning between colors like a light matte gray, as well as a dark matte black. So in between, that's what it kept, and it was very smooth. We had all looked at each other as we got online, and we decided to investigate. I actually took pictures and video of this before we actually trucked down. Once we got down this slope, we were approximately 150 meters away from this craft. The craft was roughly about 300 feet. It was rotating in a clockwise motion. On the very top, there was like a pyramid structure that you could see the shadowing of it, which would elicit that was a pyramid structure. And it had an audible hum to it, kind of like a guitar amp if you were to unplug that, or like a transformer. It's very audible. If I was to hear that sound again, I could tell you, okay, it's probably this thing or something similar to that. It's very distinct. And the way that it was floating, which was about 10 or 15, 20 feet off the ground, it was kind of a very eerie thing to see because I've never seen anything like that in my life. When we got up to that point, we were then intercepted by a team of soldiers or rogue military force, if you will. The most concerning thing about this is they all had American dialects. They had American gear. They had OTVs, black. They had black camouflage. They had very similar setups to what we had, but more high speed, something what you would see special operation groups these days have. They had no insignias on, they had no ranks, they had nothing that would signify who they were. They had black ball caps, they had M4A4s. They basically started screaming at us, telling us what we were doing, we were not allowed to be there, who were we with, what were we doing there, threatened that they could kill us right then and there. We could get lost in the jungle, they could throw us out of a helicopter if they needed to. Each Marine was then patted down along with myself. We had our weapons taken from us. They asked for our military identification. We gave it to them, obviously, because they have guns in our face. As this is going on, there was 4 of these trucks, which were F-350s. They were up-armored. They were pretty beefy. They had weapon cases that I've seen before because of something that we've actually loaded weapons into. They had 2 of them that were in the back of each truck. They also had these containers that had like a cylinder on the front, which is either for oxygen or what I hypothesized was for vacuum sealing, which lead me to suspect that they were smuggling narcotics or drugs. Come to find out it's more disturbing than that. Somebody who came forward to Dr. Greer, I don't know who they are. This gentleman has first-hand account with this and says that it was for people. It's very disheartening, especially because that part of the world have already gotten ravaged, and it's something that is very hard to see right now because of what I've witnessed, and it's very disheartening. And this is why I'm up here. So they loaded these onto this platform, and as they got up there, like I said, I was going back and forth. These guys are still searching our stuff. They're still, pointing their weapons at us. And after the last 2 trucks that I saw that actually got onto that platform unloaded, they had 4 guys in each truck that would unload everything. And these trucks drove off. As that happened, this platform actually rose up off the ground itself. The top part of the craft actually met it down in the middle like this, and it formed into one solid piece. It floated right above the tree line. As soon as it was able to break that tree line, it shot over to the left, basically where the ocean was, at so fast, I would estimate probably 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles an hour instantaneous like that. There was no rotor wash, no exhaust that would disturb the trees, vegetation. The coconuts that were on these trees were not even touched. It produced no sonic boom. This thing was so fast. So as that happened, they basically had told us to turn around, and they escorted us back up this slope. And they told us we were not allowed to look back. 2, that we were not able to talk about this. So as we broke atop this hill, we decided to book it. And we ran back to the LZ. We waited for the next CH-53 to approach, and we got on board, flew back to the ship. We turned our weapons in back to the armory. We took our gear off back in our berthing, and we went upstairs to be debriefed by an admiral that I've never seen before, and it was kind of somebody who was out of place. I don't know if he has any kind of relevance to this at all, but if that's the case, if he does, I hope he comes forward with that information. It'd be very helpful. So as we're going to go ahead and fast track to a couple days later, which we end up in Subic Bay, which is like the party town in the Philippines. So we had 3 days there of liberty. The first night I come back, because we had to report back to the ship each night, we were not allowed to stay out in town. My camera was on my rack, and the memory card that was in it was out, and my battery was out of the camera, missing as well. So all of that was missing. The only thing that was there was the camera. Mind you, I had my locker secured. I had other stuff that was basically piled on top of that camera. So whoever did it knew what the hell happened. That is my account for you guys. This is also an urging for anybody in Washington, D.C. who's a political figure. Please get this under control, because there are people who are either being hurt or killed by this, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Please.
Dr. Greer confirms that the Disclosure Project has reached out to the other members of Herrera's squad who have corroborated his story, though they do not wish to come forward.
And we have the names of the other 5 people in the platoon. Of course, these will not be disclosed because they have requested their names not be, but there's corroboration.
Stephen Michael Digna, Jr. Digna is an Army veteran who suffers from a brain injury which he received while on duty. His testimony is in regards to an incident that happened in Fort Irwin, California. During a live fire training exercise, a craft appeared over the desert.
I'm going to look down and read this. I have a brain injury, so it gives me problems. So I apologize. My name is Stephen Michael Digna, Jr. In July of 2001, I was observing a live fire practice at a level from an observation deck at approximately 3 stories high from the desert floor. The range was hot. That means rounds are being fired and lives are at risk at all times. This was interrupted by a very, very ominous call. A net call said, "Ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire." I saw a craft in the distance at approximately 200 feet off the ground, measuring approximately 172 feet across, strongly resembling a hovering B-2 Spirit. Upon first glance, my eyes were adjusting to the darkness. I could see 7 lights in a V-shape. Once my eyes adjusted, I could make out the general shape of the craft. There were 2 men from Raytheon present. I pulled out my night vision goggles to get a better look at the craft. It appeared to be generating 7 lights along its wings and underbelly. I noticed another smaller craft oriented on the right side and at the same height as the first craft, approximately 75 feet to 100 yards to its right. The second craft was jet black, V-shaped, pointed towards the first craft. This craft had equally joined, spaced, rectangular sections forming the hull. The craft had approximately 5 to 6 holographic lights, holographic emitting lights were pointed directly at the first craft. That was my assumption, due to the fact that they were displaying a strange color within my MVG goggles. Anyone that knows the old school, circa 2000 MVGs, they don't emit color. They give you green, grays, and blacks. I was seeing colors within my night vision goggles. This was not normal. And it was my assumption that perhaps this was a hologram being projected from the other craft. I can't confirm that. However, that was my assessment at the time and my suspicion at the time. I wanted to throw a baseball at it, but I didn't have one, just to see if it was tangible and solid. This was very dangerous. This craft showed up unscheduled. I got no notification. My job was to maintain command and control and to be the hub and top observer controller for the Tactical Operation Command Center for live fire desert warfare. That's the largest live fire warfare center for desert warfare on the planet and in history. So any moving objects that are on that desert floor or in those skies are supposed to be coordinated between myself and another group that I directly worked with the civilian personnel through Raytheon and the United States Air Force.
As if this experience wasn't shocking enough, a few days later, Digna and his wife were confronted by another man-made UAP.
Approximately 5 to 7 days later, the following incident took place on Fort Irwin Road. It's the one road leading into the base. My wife and I had taken a pass to go see a movie. We passed a dry lake bed on the right-hand side. My driver's side mirror reflected a powerful white light into my eyes and through all of my windows. And at that exact same time, my car's power steering and the engine's electrical system, everything died, completely died. When I exited the vehicle, I rushed towards the front of the car, believing there was someone pointing a floodlight at us. I had some words to say to that man. There was a plasma field emitting approximately 12 inches off of the craft. Inside this white plasma field, the craft seemed about approximately 23 feet long. The exterior looked like polished black onyx. As I approached the craft, I noticed ambient temperature, not hot or cold. I kind of leaned down and touched the craft, and as I swiped my hand up the craft's starboard side, also towards the front of the craft, it was as smooth as glass. However, when I drew my hand back towards me, it felt like shark skin or a cat's tongue, and I could see up into the sky above my car a mirage, which was like a silhouette or a heat foil on the road, and the stars shimmered in a straight line, and in a very long distance there was a curve. So it seemed to be curved. Either way, right when that ripple hit in the sky, the stars then refixed back into place. I realized I was looking at a cloaking device on a very, very, very large craft that seemed to encompass the whole desert area that I was under. At that moment in time, I glanced and panned my view just to try to get fathom the dimensions of this craft. And I saw a giant bright white light floating in the sky, and it was a hangar bay door opened. Couldn't see doors, it was just a bright white light. And it looked like a window floating through the sky, maybe even a portal. People might, from a distance, think, hey, that's a portal, but I obviously knew it was a craft. So this is a hangar bay door. And there was a female silhouette standing there. At that moment in time, I heard that same voice, and it said very clearly, you were not supposed to see that. That, you weren't supposed to see it. All of a sudden, I began feeling a thud, thud, thud sound. This was a resonant frequency being pulsed through my body. As I felt this, it increased in speed. Thud, 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 thud. It was very rapid. You can see the same type of thing in the movie Interstellar. Very similar when he falls through the black hole. Too similar. As this thud resonated in my body, I began lifting up off the ground. My vehicle began lifting with me also. As this happened, my body tipped back, and I could see the underbelly of the craft. Instantaneously, I was flat on my back, and I was staring up at the ceiling. And this all happened in milliseconds, guys. This was, oh crap, what's happening? So this is a very short encounter here. This isn't a story, it's my story. This is a real story. And don't forget that. This is real. This can't be made up. And I can give you the exact locations. I can drive Dr. Greer and all of the command, Congress, everyone there to the bunker.
Steven Greer continues to call for investigation and reform. These are crimes being committed against our U.S. military members.
But I will tell you that this is not a typical, the craft he was referring to are ours. That was Raytheon objects. Those are, and he said, yes, they are. His key point needs to be made, absolutely. They have been used in simulated quote-unquote abductions. In this case, a very decorated and heroic man was essentially tortured by this. This is a crime that must be investigated and brought to justice quickly.
The next whistleblower at the event was D.C. Long. His military career spanned 16 years from 1997 to 2013.
My military service began in 1997 and it stretched to 2013 until I was medically retired, injuries received in a combat jump. Long story short, my father grew up as a contractor. That was his entire life. He could build anything with his hands. He could tear it down and build it again for you. I segue that, and the only reason I bring him up is because my father is how I got tied into this story. As a government contractor on Fort Bragg, he met some people. He got friends with some people in the upper echelons of the military, the tip of the spear. The guys who didn't need the Army Corps of Engineers permission to build anything that they wanted. These people that I met when I was 13 years old. We would go on hunts together. We would go on fishing trips together, riding their planes. They would take us all over the continental U.S. just to enjoy their time together. People that I thought were my friends, that I didn't know that they were in the military until years after I had been in myself. We meet up at 18th Airborne Headquarters by my father's request from me. He asked me if I could help him assist. We didn't know where the project was. We were told that we were going to be met by an escort from the JFK Warfare Center. He shows up. I recognize him as one of my father's friends. They take us to a freight elevator. We take the elevator down. At that time, we were instructed, keep your heads down, keep your eyes on the heels of the men in front of you, or you'll be fired upon. I've heard plenty of instances of military jargon. People like to jibe each other. I didn't take it as a joke, but I knew enough to just do what he told me to. I didn't want to risk it. As soon as the freight elevator opened, the first thing that I could see were a few personnel connexes to the right in a large hangar, maybe twice, 3 times the size of the area that we're in now. There was a monolithic slab directly in front of me that was being held up by nothing. The closer that I got to this slab, I felt an intense vibration inside of my body. I never felt anything like that before in my life, never anything since, but it left no sound. The loudest thing in that room was the silence and the footfalls of the people in front of and behind me. As I got closer, my natural southern curiosity took over. Oh, my shoes are untied. So I go down just to take a peek. And there's absolutely nothing up underneath this monolithic slab that if I had to estimate would be well over 100 tons. Absolutely nothing holding it up. You could see what looked like a box on top that was black with spires that came off, and I couldn't tell where it was connected, but it obviously had something to do with the levitation. At this point, from my knees, the escort needed me in the back, said, let's go. We follow on, go downstairs to our appointed place to take measurements for an underground firing facility for a live fire range. When it was all said and done, less than 15, 20 minutes later, we make our way back through the same hangar, and there was absolutely nothing there. We make our way out, we get back in the van, and they take us back to 18th Airborne Headquarters so we can retrieve our telephones, our IDs. Something was said to my father, and they retrieved all of the notes that were taken. Everything that he had that he recorded from whenever we were downstairs, they took it from him. I didn't think much of it. I go back upstairs, help him wrap up in the G5 war room. And it was at that time there was a gentleman sitting at the desk. Everyone was cleared out. And he had 2 pieces of paper. He said, I need you to sign this NDA. Absolutely not. You know, we didn't so much take it as a joke, but we just didn't feel like the things that we had witnessed, although I did realize it was something that I never should have seen in my life. We weren't going to sign it. Didn't think anything of it. I leave. I get a call the next day, less than 24 hours later. Hey, man, you need to come down. We're trying to go to work, and everything's locked up. Everything's gone. Everything that my father had worked for, from the time that I was a child until I became a man, became a soldier, and the company that had my name on it, everything was seized. Absolutely everything was seized. The pencils that he would use to make bid submittals to the Army Corps of Engineers was even taken because it contributed from the business. Everything was taken. I can't illustrate that point enough. My father went from being a very humble millionaire to absolutely broke, bankrupt, and destitute in 24 hours. Now, I wish I could tell you more about how much I love this man, not just because I have his name, not just because he's my father, but he was my best friend. He led me through every battle when I came home to let me know that it was okay to feel the things that I felt. This man and I, we were always together. The only thing that could separate us was the deployments and the uniform that I wore. When I got done with my fight, I found my father. When I was scared, I found my father, etc. This man that was my best friend looked me in the eye when I found him again and said, hey man, do you think this had something to do with Range 19? Please pardon my language. My father looks at me and says, don't you ever fucking bring that up to me again. That was the last time that I heard my father's voice. in this life. That was the last time that we ever had any peaceful interaction, and that was as peaceful as it got. Shortly after, I continued on, and we had a JFEX. Any of my old paratroopers, they know what that is. It's a jump field training exercise, battalion wide. It's a big deal. There's only 12 men in my stick, getting ready to go out of the bird. I'm the first man looking at the horizon, waiting for the jump master to give me the signal. His hand's raised. I notice at the right side, someone coming up to my shoulder, and it's one of the escorts. One of the men that I knew personally from the time I was a child till I was a man and a soldier. He hooks up, he looks at me, gives me a wink. I didn't think much of it. To me, there was no danger at that point. Green light goes off, I get a hit in my back, and then something hits me in the side of the face, and it's a static line. The gentleman to my right, the man that I knew, threw his static line intentionally, and it snapped my neck. I go to fall out of the aircraft, deploy my combat pack, full oscillation. The only thing that I heard after that was the sound that my body made when it broke. When I woke up a month later, I was told that I was not fit to be a Ranger. I was not fit to be airborne. I wasn't fit to be a soldier. My career was effectively over. Even throughout all this time, I could not reach out to my father. He wouldn't take my calls. He was homeless. I didn't know. I just thought he didn't want to talk to me. Eventually, I ended up in the same situation. This follows further down the road to about 2 years ago, whenever I finally was saved by someone who I didn't even deserve to hear the sound of their voice. I had intentionally grown my hair past my shoulders, my beard down to my stomach. I was 135 pounds just because I was hoping I could hide. I was hoping I could get away from what put me in that position to begin with. I get a phone call. It was 2 years ago. We found Daddy. He's in the hospital. I go down to see my father. He couldn't speak. The man that was 6'4", 240 pounds, a superhero in my eyes, not just because he was my daddy, because he was a tough son of a bitch. He was laying in a hospital bed, 98 pounds. When the people who I encountered after the fact that had actually spent time, and got my father out of his homeless situation to help him get back on his feet, to give him the drive, to get back to doing the only thing that he knew how to do was to be a government contractor, they put him back in contact with some of the people that he thought could help him. I can't illustrate this fact enough. In the time span of 3 months, my father went from 6'4", 240 to 98 pounds, dying in a hospital room, and he couldn't even speak because the chemo was burning his lips. I told him, I love you. Don't worry about us. We're square. I want to make you proud. Before Dr. Greer and I came in contact with each other, and I'm almost done, I wrote my story, and I entitled it, I'm Afraid to Say. And people have asked me, well, why did you wait so long? It's obvious why we waited so long to send it. Nobody knows this. My family doesn't know this. Dr. Greer obviously doesn't know this. When I sent that, I was planning on taking my life because they took every damn thing from me. I could handle losing my career. I was willing to die for my country. I was hoping like hell I would. Somehow I survived. And then they tried to take me again. They can have all that. I knew that when I put these around my neck. But my intention was to take my own life because I just couldn't do it anymore. I heard this man's words with Sean Ryan. If good men do nothing, then evil men will prevail. I am damn tired of doing nothing. This is the absolute last thing that I'm going to say to you. I was trained to never fight. I was trained to fight, never give up, never stop, as long as you had a breath in your body. I gave my breath away. The people in this room, everyone that I've had the blessed opportunity to spend time with, I've heard you say that we're brave. that were heroes, and it embarrasses me because I personally felt like I don't deserve to be in the room with all of you heroes, because I would not have the words and the breath to come from my body if it wasn't for the strength that you give me when you shake my hand, when you hug my neck. Thank you so much. Godspeed.
Men are courageous, and it's very emotional. And it should be. Should be.
The final whistleblower testimony comes from Eric Hecker, who was a Raytheon contractor at the South Pole. Hecker's claims are particularly alarming.
In 2010, I was selected to go down to the South Pole Station in Antarctica for an entire year by Raytheon Polar Services as an employee of a third-party contractor for the National Science Foundation. I functioned in a dual-role capacity as a tradesman and a firefighter. My responsibilities required me to be more informed than most of my crew and offered me complete access to the facilities. What I learned from this unique experience needs to be shared with the entire world. The technology at the South Pole Station certainly can do what it is presented as its primary purposes, and unfortunately, much more. The Ice Cube neutrino detector is presented as a passive listening device for the purposes of the science as presented. But I'm going to skip right through the chase, folks. I have provided documentation that proves that the 5,160, what they call DOMs, that are embedded in the ice can actually transmit at 2,047 volts each. That gives us a long list of things to consider. It is effectively a multifaceted directed energy weapons platform that I will list rapidly a few things that it can do. Vehicle detection. We're learning that these off-world craft, on-world craft, ours or other nations, are also emitting neutrinos. So this makes the South Pole Station effectively an air traffic control station for this new level of equipment that nobody's discussing. In addition to the ability to detect neutrinos and the exotic vehicles, I have provided documentation that shows that this is also a system for faster than light communications. In the past, Gary McKinnon has hacked NASA, found the off-world fleet, the list of captains, and it's apparent that if we have faster than light vehicles moving throughout this system, we're going to need faster than light communications. This is that facility. Unfortunately, I have other bad news. The season that I was there, 2010 to 2011, we converted from construction to operations and maintenance in both the elevated station and the detector array. Unfortunately, when they first fired it up, that was when we had the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand. There's 2 incidental shots before they were able to target it correctly. This is an earthquake generating device as well. This is the weapons of war that we have to deal with now and what Raytheon's hiding. There's an ELF system at the South Pole Station that when I arrived, I was told it was off, dismantled, and completely defunct. In my work, I will rapidly just tell you, I had to figure out the circuitry for certain other repairs, and I found that this system is in fact completely energized, up and running, and being utilized with the other systems for nefarious purposes as well. The Atmospheric Research Observatory is in what we call the clean air sector. I witnessed myself a very powerful green laser shooting out of the top of this facility into the cosmos. This, I believe, is a secondary form of long-range communications and or a defense system. I am not saying that we need to be scared of anything that's out there, but please understand the military-industrial complex is happy to invest all of your money in alleviating their fears. A question of power comes into play for all of these facilities that are present. I assure you, I knew what was going on, I knew the load demands of the facility, and all of these new items exceed the demand for the systems that I was presented. I am doing due diligence and research. I believe there is either a secondary power supply there that is either nuclear, that was there prior to the start of the Antarctic Treaty, which prohibits such things, and or that there is some sort of exotic power supply system there that just is not in the verbiage of the treaty, so it negates the responsibility to the parties involved. I have a website where all this information is at. For brevity, I'll wrap it up, but you can go to deciphering.tv. I've documented all of this stuff, and information is available.
I will tell you that effectively the constitutional government of the United States, at least in this area, has been nullified since about the late 1950s. And we have tracked this. It's a huge problem. Senator Inouye knew it. Now, in other regards, it's business as usual. But remember, this organization is transnational. It operates globally with alacrity, as I mentioned. And so this is not just a U.S. problem, it's a global problem. But the center of gravity of it is here in the United States.
In the realm of conspiracy theories and speculations, claims of a shadow government engaging in the clandestine activity of reverse engineering advanced technologies from otherworldly origins might be hard to believe for some, but if even one of the testimonials we've reviewed here are true, then people must consider that a shadow government, complete with its own military and intelligence branches, may be operating above the law and in a perilous manner. Transparency and accountability are the keys to uncovering the truth. Until we have those, however, we can all be grateful for the whistleblowers that are coming forward and sharing their experiences. I hope you liked this episode of Getting Spooky. If you did, please consider hitting the like button and sharing this video with a friend or two. There's a link below to Steven Greer's entire presentation. It is well worth the watch. Until next time, stay safe and get spooky.